everybody, my name's Link, here to talk about the cultural references and secrets from the new Netflix anime, Trese. For the unaware, Trese is based off of a Filipino comic that is soaked heavily in Filipino culture and mythology. And after talking with non-Filipino friends, I realized a lot of nuances were lost in them. Along with the fact that I felt like the show could have done a better job in explaining some of the creatures, since Filipino mythos is hardly anything common or discussed. And you'll be surprised about just how many aspects is the cultural references right in plain sight. Fair warning though, since I'll be covering the creatures and plot points in the show, I'll be basically spoiling the whole series. Be sure to stream Trese on Netflix, available in English and Tagalog. I'll also be making a should you be watching video of this one after the short series, because I'm only covering 3 episodes in this video and I'm already reaching 6 pages for the script. And one last disclaimer, the things I'm about to say here are from my perspective and what I've learned culturally myself. With the Philippines having 7,640 islands amongst its 3 main regions, there are countless differences in even the most common mythical creature. These are just my personal interpretations, gathered from living in a superstitious part of a specific province in Luzon. And there are countless ways it can vary from place to place. Okay, with all that out of the way, let's start off with the most eye-catching and arguably the most important creatures in the series, the twins, locally known as the Kambal. I won't go much into their powers as offsprings of the god of war. I'd like to cover all of that when I cover Dato Talagbusao in part 2. But fun fact, their names are actually based off characters from our national hero Jose Rizal's novel Noli Me Tangere, or in English, Touch Me Not. And Jose Rizal's intentions were to open the eyes of the brainwashed Filipinos about the mistreatment they faced under the Spanish colonization with the use of power and religion through his books, as well as to show the Filipinos how their harsh law and classism has had them turning against each other. Fun start! Crispin and Basilio in the novel were part of the most famous, or infamous, depend on who you're asking, story. Sons of Sisa, a former aristocrat girl who lost her status for marrying a good-for-nothing gambler. They got by and eventually the boys worked as sacristans for a church, obviously. But everything goes downhill when one day they were suddenly accused of stealing gold pieces. Out of nowhere, the sacristan mayor arrived and started beating them. Basilio was able to escape, but Crispin couldn't and was left behind. His brother ran all the way back home, telling his mother about the event. Crispin's fate was never fully disclosed, but Basilio had a dream that he was beaten by the sacristan mayor and the priest to death. Next morning, still believing that he's alive, their mother Sisa went to the church to fetch Crispin. But while she was out, Basilio noticed a Guardia Civil was approaching and made a run for it, along the way getting injured and falling unconscious. Thankfully, he was picked up by a commoner family but needing 2 months to recover from his injuries, as well as hide from the authorities. When he returned, he found his mother in the town square, now insane with grief after presumably losing both her sons. She ran away when she noticed Basilio in a mad haze, but he gave chase until they were in the forest. Sisa had a few moments of lucidity before she eventually died. There's a hopeful ending for Basilio, but I won't go into it because it doesn't really matter for our subject of this video. Some things of note is that in Trese, Crispin is the older brother, more serious and responsible of the two, while that naturally leaves Basilio to be the more playful and lax younger brother. But in the original novel, Basilio was the older one. Outside of their names, there's nothing that really connects these mask-wearing, gun-slinging half-dated twins to the novel characters. Even the Trese twins' mother doesn't match, since Sisa is arguably on the same, if not more notoriety level as the brothers. I just wanted to express how the names Crispin and Basilio are iconic and recognizable to most Filipinos that foreigners might not recognize, since this novel is part of our curriculum. They're set, like how Jack and Jill is, Peanut Butter and Jelly, Jekyll and Hyde. Moving on to the actual episode, I will be skipping the splashes of random creatures and focus more on the focal points of the show. I feel like I don't have to elaborate on the white lady as much, since there are variations of her around the world, and the story is pretty much consistent. Of a lady in a white gown that still roams around their living because of some lingering regrets, either due to committing suicide, being murdered by a lover or a loved one, or dying because she was being cheated on or jealousy. Imagine any tragic story you can for a female ghost. What is of cultural interest is the Balete drive where the white lady was spotted. Balete is a sort of large fig tree that's commonly surrounded by strangler figs, so it has this eerie look with all of its hanging roots from its tall branches. It's a local belief that these types of trees are home to mythical creatures, and so it's advised people don't keep them as decorative plants. With that being said, there's a street named after that giant tree that's claimed to be extremely haunted, and does in fact have stories of an infamous white lady appearing to hail taxis late at night, and even cause accidents by either appearing in front of the cars or inside a car's back seat, getting so out of hand that it even appears on national news at points. Now onto an unexpected fan favorite. Nuno, or more commonly known as Nuno sa Punso, means old man of the mound. From the root word ninuno, that's something akin to ancestor or just anything to pertain to an elderly. And the earth mound is actually an anthill or a termite mound. It's a common belief that they are easily angered old men who will curse you if you trespass their home, or, God forbid, actually step on it. Or worse, in which they will curse your foot or any other body part that may have offended the nuno that will cause unbearable pain and swelling. And this is where the famous
Tabi-tabi po
line comes from, where you politely make your presence known and ask for permission to pass through. And while they seem terrifying and not to be trifled with, only adults and naughty kids should really fear them, as they're also said to like to play with children. You can see why he's the perfect role for the informant, since he's used to traveling through complex channels, now modernized to be Manila's sewer system. I don't really know where the idea of a nuno liking chocolate came from, but also, if you ask anyone who's eaten a chocnut, me included, I'd also snitch on anyone for that brittle, chocolatey, nutty goodness. One interest of note is that in the original comic, you can see Alexandra first approach an earth mound before the Nuno calls her attention to the sewers. I just thought it was a nice little detail to see just how out of touch Alexandra really is after inheriting her father's duty, as well as how the creatures of old are adjusting to the rapid modernization. Here's an interesting one you might not have known. It wasn't so obvious in the anime, but I have reason to believe that Ibwa, the head of the human wet market, is a shokoy. They're our male equivalent to the beautiful mermaids, or sirenas in Tagalog. Though there are also variations of a more traditional, handsome merman called sirenos. But the shokoy are way uglier, but just as murderous. And it just made sense. They were asking about mermaid bones, and wouldn't it make sense that the other water-dwelling race catch them? And the last bit is that Alexandra called him the chief of the Sapa clan. Sapa is a Tagalog word for a creek or a brook. My mom when I don't clean my toys up after playing with them. The spell Alexandra says here is,
sa mata ng iba, mga lihim, magpapakita.
Means, in the eyes of others, the secrets will be revealed. And I just gotta say, I really love them for keeping the original Tagalog phrase and spells in all of the dubs. It makes me feel like my language is mystical and powerful. In the flashback, Alexandra's mom prays for her safety by saying,
Mariang Makiling, diwata ng bundok, pagpalain niyo kami.
Which means, Maria Makiling, goddess of the mountain, please bless us. Maria Makiling is one of the most famous deity in Filipino mythology. She is the guardian spirit of Mount Makiling, though it's unclear if the mountain was named after her or vice versa. The people of old pray to her for protections from earthquakes, typhoons, and other natural calamities, as well as pay respect to her for the mountain's bounty, like fruits and plants, and in some cases, even the fish in the bay nearby. Unrelated to the show is that it's said that Mount Makiling resembles a woman's visage, notably Maria Makiling herself. Santelmo's, or the English translations, Saint Elmo's fires, is pretty cut and dry. They're fire elementals that Alexandra can summon. There are versions of it around the world, so I want to focus on things unique to the Philippines. And the one thing I feel worthy of note is the one that Alexandra summons in particular is the spirit of the Great Binondo Fire. confirmed by the number she dials to summon him, which correlates to the date, March 3, 1870. At the time, Binondo had become Manila's main retail center, but a case of the wrong place and wrong time scenario happened as a fire broke out in the shopping district during the dry season. It's unfortunately a common occurrence that lots of fires turn into raging infernos in a blink of an eye due to things being made of flammable material. And in a matter of hours, millions of pesos of materials and goods were reduced to ash. The damage was so great that it threatened to destroy the most populated part of Manila.
Mga kaluluwa, saan kayo papunta? Ako'y makikiraan, kaya't pakibuksan ang pintuan.
That means, spirits, where are you headed? I will be passing through, so please open the door. Unfortunately, I don't know much about the emissary, since she and the goddess she serves are strictly of Mindanao origin. And like I said in the beginning, I'm from Luzon. Well, the Philippines is mostly a Catholic country because, thanks colonialism, Mindanao has considerably larger Muslim and Hindu Javanese influences. So religion and culture is already vastly different from what I grew up on. And I also can't draw from the original comics because, as far as I can recall, she wasn't there. Though, don't hold me to that, because I left my comics in my childhood home and I can't confirm. But one thing I am certain of is that she's very, very pretty. And additionally, my very vague understanding of the goddess she answers to is that Ibwa is the ruler of the land of the dead, where under her governance, there are no worries or troubles, and the souls in the underworld continue to eat, work, and marry. I'm sorry I can't add more to that. I'm just as disappointed as you are. Xa-mul and his gang seem to be a bunch of indistinct aswang. Aswang is an umbrella term to refer to any carnivorous monster. While they can also feast on the flesh and blood of farm animals, without a doubt they find human meat a delicacy. Depending on the type of aswang, they have various abilities, like being able to suck blood out of their victims' belly buttons using their long tongues like a straw, or separate their torso from their lower body. Though, without them firmly resembling any specific aswang, it's hard to tell what their unique abilities could be, aside from being ugly and having very sharp teeth. Fun fact though, aswang, and actually most of the creatures here, existed before colonizers came, and they made note that the natives feared aswang the most. There were even reports of the foreigners staying back then hearing strange noises in the night, and got stared at eerily when he relayed the noises he heard to the natives. Heading on to episode 2, in the flashback we saw Alexander's father, Anton, and his partners back then that were named Bantay and Puti. These are very common dog names here. Bantay means guard, which references Filipinos' reliance on their guard dogs. Meanwhile, Puti just means white. And yes, naming your dog by their fur color is very common. I had a childhood dog named Brownie in fact. You'll never guess what he looked like. And yes, rare dogs do exist in Filipino culture, though they usually attack and eat humans. But the name suggests that they were domesticated dogs rather than the wild ones. While the wind spirits here are pretty self-explanatory, they're elementals imbued with the power of the wind. Their names, Ammie and Hannah, are actually a play on the Tagalog word, amihan, which refers to hanging amihan, or in English, northeast monsoon. And that signifies the cold wind once the cold seasons finally arrive. Since this tropical country only has 2 seasons, burning in hell and being drowned by Mother Nature. The main focus of the episode is definitely the Tikbalang. While they do look fierce and menacing, and don't be mistaken, they can do you harm, they're more chill than you realize. The stories about them are mixed, with some claiming they're benevolent warriors that guard the elementals, while the more mischievous tale have them misleading and tricking travelers around their woods, making them run around in circles, resulting in them hopelessly lost. The countermeasure to this is wearing your shirt inside out, so it will confuse the reverse centaur and a path will open up. Or heck, just be respectful and use that
Tabi-tabi po.
to make your presence known and to not cause much of a disturbance in their home. A cool little tidbit though, if you're familiar with a fox wedding or the instance where it rains on a sunny day, well, our version of that is a Tikbalang's wedding. And my mom still very much says, may kinakasal na Tikbalang ah, when this phenomenon happens. By the way, Malixi's name is just the Tagalog word for fast or agile. Fun fact, these are the artist and the author respectively.
Mga dating nakakubli, ngayoy ibunyag.
Just means, what were once obscured shall now be revealed. And about these two baddies, you know the drill, they're elementals. Bagyo is the Tagalog word for storm or hurricane. Bagyong Lektro's name is just a play on the word Lektro or electricity. Meanwhile, Kulimlim's name means forecast in English. It's the time when the sky gets dark before the upcoming rain. And hopping on to episode 3,
Ibunyag ang nakatago.
that's Reveal That Is Hidden. We meet a duwende named Amang Paso. I won't go much into him since he's somewhat similar to Nuno, so I'll just tell you what his name means. Amang could mean father, while Paso is actually something like a flower pot, which is apt for when we first see him emerging from one. Not to be confused with the word pasok though, which means burn. Like what happened to my finger the other day while cooking fried rice. And lastly for this video is the Tiyanak. Interestingly, the Tiyanaks are the only one they gave any actual semblance of a deep lore in it. So, the story already went over to what kind of creatures they are, how they're created, what they do, and their desires. So I'll just throw in a little tidbit that when they don't go after their victims, they live deep in the woods and imitate the voice of a crying infant to attract unsuspecting victims. Sorry if this sounds cruel to y'all, but if I ever hear a crying child in the woods, I'm booking it in the other direction. Whew! Okay, that's it for part 1 of this small series I'm doing. I'll be covering episodes 4 to 6 in part 2. Make sure to subscribe to be the first to see when it comes out. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up if you liked the video and drop a comment if you want to see more stuff like this. Bye-bye!